Hello and welcome to At the Table. I'm Audrey Galix. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, apparently the story goes back in 2005, Daren Wang came up with this hatched a harebrained idea to start a book festival in the city of Decatur. It has since grown into the largest book festival in the United States. And to talk about it, we actually have Daren Wang with us. Thank you for being with us, as well as Julie Wilson, who's the program director of the festival, this incredible festival. Every Labor Day weekend in Decatur, it has become an institution. And here it is, 2017, how many years later?
Only 3, it feels like.
Yeah, I bet. Kind of like birthing a baby, though, I suspect. All of a sudden, they're small and then, right. So if you would, walk us through a bit of the history, and then we'll share with our audience some of the highlights of the 2017 festival, even though I know we often air these interviews, for years to come. People will know the kind of festival it is. So how did this all come to be?
Well, first I have to do just a quick correction. It's the largest, we say the largest independent book festival.
Oh, independent, excuse me.
Yeah. There are Miami's bigger, the National Book Festival, and anyway. But
I'm sure Decatur will overtake Miami.
Set your goals.
Right. You can dream.
But that story is largely true. I had been working in public radio. I knew you back in those days.
That's right. Where we met. Yeah.
And I'd been working in public radio doing a series called Spoken Word, where I was recording author events around the South. And I went to a really great festival in Columbia, South Carolina, the South Carolina Book Festival, in February of 2005, and drove back.
Do it here, huh?
And I said, why is there this great festival in Columbia? We don't have one in Atlanta Metro. So I started talking to people because of the public radio gig. I knew a lot of people in the business here in town, and Tom Bell and Mark Fitton, who's a novelist here in town now, and I sat around. I remember sitting around in Java Monkey one February afternoon and saying, "All right, this person and that person, we should be calling these person." We came up with a good list, and there'd been some talk of festivals going on already. So some people have been discussing things. There's 2 or 3 different parties, but we kind of started plowing ahead, and some joined in and some didn't. And
I want to explore for just a second that whole concept of an independent book festival. Are these other festivals, they're book publishers, or who?
Well, so the Miami Book Festival is owned by Miami-Dade College. The National Book Festival in Washington, D.C. is put on essentially by the Library of Congress, with the National Endowment for the Arts as handling the programming. LA Times Book Festival, owned by the LA Times. Right. And then there's us.
And it is the AJC Decatur. I should have probably said that off the top.
It is the AJC Decatur Book Festival. AJC is our sponsor, however. We don't. They're very generous to us. We love them dearly, but
we'll acknowledge them warmly.
Yeah, I can say nothing but great things about the AJC and their participation. But Julie and I are in a rented office above a church in downtown Decatur. We are, and every month I try and figure out how to pay that rent bill. So
there you go. I mean, you go into the sanctuary and pray. Maybe it's very convenient to have that.
Check the box. Yeah. Anything left? No.
And Julie, what do you attribute its growth to? Because I don't know how many tens of thousands of people would you say?
70,000, 80,000 people for the weekend. I think we live in a town that's curious, that likes to learn. I think we talk about being Decatur specifically, but I think Metro Atlanta, there are a lot of really bright people here that love to read. I think there's an article in the past year that said Atlanta was the 5th most literate city in the country, which surprises some people, but we like to read. And I think what I love about the festival is, I'm the mother of a 10-year-old, so a pretty young son, and I know families in Decatur that purposely stay in Decatur for the book festival because we expose people to so many different types of authors, but we also include the kids.
And that's an important thing.
That's a huge part of it.
And there are a lot of different tracks
there are a lot of different tracks. We really don't exclude any particular genre. We really try to get a really broad mix of authors there, both national, regional, and local, to have a really good blend of names and also folks that you may not know about but should. And I love putting that together. I love and we kind of focus on, well, our programming, we don't have a theme every year. In one way it bubbles up to see what books are coming out, but we also, I think, tend to follow what's going on in the world. And I think this year, for our keynote, is a perfect example of that. It's focused on journalism in our current environment. And we have
all news,
all the
and
news, fake news,
and
24-hour news cycle, all of that, social media, and how that plays into journalism these days. And we've got Brooke Gladstone from NPR. We've got Carolyn Ryan, the assistant editor of the New York Times, and Wesley Lowery, a reporter from the Washington Post, to have that conversation with Kevin Riley from the AJC. So,
can I please ask you to record these for those of us who find themselves, at family events and even.
I believe that we're going to be Facebook living that keynote.
I don't know if that's a verb now, Facebook living.
Facebook living, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
So what's new this year beyond the journalism?
We don't have anything that's particularly new this year. I think that we've just focused, one area that we've really focused on the past 3 years is our culinary area. And part of it is to really create this to be the food and beverage publishing event in the country. And it's working. I mean, we have a stellar lineup on that stage, from James Beard Award-winning chefs to James Beard Award-winning authors. So we're going to have demos, we're going to have talks about cocktails, but we also have so many wonderful cooking-related folks that we have at least 4 different authors who are on our main stages talking about food history, talking about a food memoir. So that's an area that we've really spent a lot of time and energy growing.
Interesting. I never thought about books, food. I mean, that would be an interesting sub-theme, perhaps. Daren, you've watched this festival grow over the years. Is there anything special this year for you that you want to make sure people know about?
I'm really looking forward to the keynote as well, and the whole journalism track, having that step up. We talked about it earlier in the year, and it is, it feels pressing to me.
No pun intended.
Really not intended. I'm sorry.
Yeah, roll that out sometime.
But and there's a lot of great. One of the things that happens when people think about a book festival is they think of they immediately think novel, somebody writing fiction, right? And so much of what the festival it expands beyond that. We have this fantastic science tavern track and really robust programming on that.
And that's a partnership also with the
Science Tavern.
And before you go, I was just thinking, I wonder if you had a thing where you're inviting people to bring their own family cookbooks or something, a way to make the festival interactive. Should have held that for after the show, but I just thought I'd share that.
We actually talked about something about that earlier this year. Because there are tools that didn't work out this year, but we do look for things like that. We do look for opportunities around cooking that aren't just cooking.
Like being lectured to or what have you. Right. I'm sorry about that. Okay, a little sidebar. But you were talking about the science track.
Yeah. So the science track is really robust, and we have some great memoirs. We've got other kinds of nonfiction going on. We have as usual, have fantastic poetry programming, and it's so people think about it as a celebration of literature, which it is, but. We always joke, Julie brought up the word curiosity, or being a curious town, Decatur, and I might...
Curious in many ways.
Yeah, you're curious in many ways. Yeah, exactly. And I always, I say it's a lousy brand name, but I would in essence call it a curiosity festival, not a book festival, because what drives people to come to the book festival year after year is more so than kind of any other cultural event. They want to come and learn. They want to hear about interesting and different cultures and ideas and facts and
maybe subjects they usually don't study.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things that we started a slogan a few years ago that bubbles up every once in a while called "Read Different," and the sensibility behind it is that if you come into the book festival and you might be bringing your kids to see the parade at 9:30 on Saturday morning or 11:30 on Sunday morning, and then you have an author you want to see at 10, and then you have another author you want to see at 1:30, and then there's a couple of slots in between, right, when there's nothing scheduled. And what you should do is, the idea of Read Different is look at something that you would normally never go see, and go spend an hour and learn something different, and expand your horizons that way. So what's new at the festival?
It's an experience. It's a happening.
Yeah, I mean, you ask what's kind of new, and it's the Decatur Book Festival, but there's over 300 books being presented that weren't presented last year. Right. So that's all new.
And you're also featuring not just nationally known,
right.
I was going to say artists, but authors are artists, but also local and emerging talent as well.
Right. So one of something I'm most excited about that he won't talk about is our own Daren Wang has written a novel. That's an exciting novel.
I have the review from the AJC right here.
I think that's a great story in itself, though, of seeing both sides of the literature industry's business, and we're excited to launch his book because I've read the book; it's a good book. But we also have Charles Frazier in town who's going to be interviewing Daren, and it happens to be the 20th anniversary of Cold Mountain. So we're able to highlight really great fiction as well. Tom Perrotta's here. We've got Tess Gerritsen. We've got Elizabeth Kostova. A lot of just great novelists that are here that have an established base that I think is exciting.
Yeah.
One of the premises of your books I love is you grew up in this town in the north that actually sided with the south.
Yeah, so the secession, it wasn't unanimous. It was 80 to 43 or something like that. But it happened in December of 1861, so roughly 7 months after the war started. There was never really a historical explanation of what the secession was, but I grew up in this house that was a converted barn. The barn had been built by the town's founder, and his daughter had run an underground railroad station in the barn. Yet the town had seceded, so this kind of conflict of place. And it drove me to explore it and write about it. By the way, I have to say this: the name of the book is "The Hidden Light of Northern Fires."
And where does that come from?
It actually has something of a biblical basis on it. The idea of I think it's Sermon on the Mount that says, "Don't hide your light under a bushel," right? Oh. And so there's an echo of that, but also the idea that. Frederick Douglass was writing maybe 40, 50 miles from town line in Rochester, and his publication is Northern Star. So this whole light north and south and everything, I kind of came up with something that echoed all of that.
Well, if you're nice to Julie, I bet she'll let you present your book at the festival coming up, because I understand that you've now stepped down as executive director.
I at the end of this year, I've got another 5 months to go.
Wow, well, congratulations on the book and creating this harebrained idea, or what is it? Hatched a harebrained idea. I love that. We should all do that. I think have it be so successful. Daren Wang, Julie Wilson of the Decatur Book Festival, thanks for being with us at the table. Thank you for being with us at the table. And don't you go away. At the Table will return in a moment. Thanks. Welcome back to At the Table. I'm Audrey Galix. Thanks so much again for joining us. We just got done speaking with the founder of the Decatur Book Festival, the program director, and now we have an opportunity to speak with one of the emerging authors who is going to be featured at the festival. With me is Donnie Winokur, where's that come from? You have written a poignant book about your family and a service dog that came into your life. And let me hold this book up so our audience can see this book, Chancer, How One Good Boy Saved Another. And I'd love for you to share, not give away the whole shot, but to share a bit about the story, about your memoir.
Okay. Harvey and I, my husband and I, adopted 2 infants from Russia in 1999. They're 2 days apart in age from 2 different orphanages, which we didn't know until we got to Russia. And so we brought them over here. They were 14 months. And as the kids developed, it was evident to us that Ayal, our son, was having a lot of difficulties just in his behaviors. Of course, he didn't know it because he was only 3, but we started to see some things that really were a concern. Ayal was incredibly energetic, just all over the place, had a hard time sleeping and staying asleep.
Well, the energetic part, little boys are that way.
Right, right. And so you don't know exactly, what to look for, what might be going on. But during that year, when he was 3, we thought we need to get this checked out. So it took us 9 months to get in to see a developmental pediatrician. And when we did, Ayal was given a diagnosis of fetal alcohol syndrome, which is FAS. And FAS is the most severe expression of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, FASDs. Of course, there were words on a paper. We had no idea what they meant.
Yeah, it must have been devastating.
Well, it was, because we went in thinking, maybe this is ADHD or something like that. And even that disability, we weren't all that educated about.
Who is, really?
Yeah. And I think when you're young, people don't want to put a label on little kids like that. However, that age is when a lot of the symptoms emerge with this organic brain damage. So fetal alcohol spectrum disorders are a group of conditions that can occur in a person whose mother drank alcohol while pregnant. And what you might see is it can affect somebody physically, cognitively, intellectually, as well as emotionally, and it's responsible for a lot of mental disorders. Actually, 97% of people who experience FASDs also are challenged by mental illness. So there's a lot of overlap of different things, and it's, in a sense, a hidden or invisible disability, but it looks a lot like people who experience autism and other behavioral challenges. But what we know is that the effects of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder last a lifetime, but they're completely preventable if a developing baby isn't exposed to alcohol. And right now, part of why I wrote the book is that it's a public health crisis. Up to 1 in 20 school-aged children in the United States might have fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, which is devastating to think about that. So the book really became a way to expose people to this, or expose this hidden disability to the bigger population.
Because it perhaps isn't something one considers oftentimes.
No.
And if is it something that even with like one drink, you don't know you're pregnant, you go out and split a pitcher of margaritas or something with a buddy. I mean, could it be that even?
Well, what's scary, I think, is women might not even know they're pregnant for 4 to 6 weeks or 2 months even, and so you don't necessarily have to be alcoholic or have a problem with.
Watch out,
I'm sorry.
Mike. That's okay.
Have challenges in terms of not drinking while pregnant. But what we know is that there is no safe time, no safe kind of alcohol. And if you think you're going to be pregnant, trying to get pregnant, or you may be pregnant, just stop drinking alcohol. Because we know that from day 21 on through the gestation, the brain could be affected if the mother's consuming alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you get this diagnosis. Perhaps were you given a sheet of paper here, some resources, or
Exactly. But still, it was something most people didn't know about at that time. That's like only 14, 15 years ago now. So we tried all kinds of interventions, OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, all kinds of sensory therapies, because sensory integration disorder is also very prevalent in this disability, which means that, well, in Ayal's case, in our son's case, he was very aversive to my touch at different times, although he craved it at certain times. And just some really unusual things. He can't look at certain pictures. They just kind of make him very uncomfortable. There are magnets on a refrigerator that he just can't look at, so he has to sit in a way that he's not looking at them. And what we have come to find out is some of these may actually be sensory hallucinations. So there's some psychotic fallout from this disability as well. So over time, and we didn't have that diagnosis until this past year. So the diagnoses accumulated over time because they can coexist in something like this, which is an umbrella. So we were getting very frustrated, very worried, and trying so hard to give Ayal different kinds of support. But it was just so difficult to help him feel good about himself, to help him be able to relate to other people. And I came across an article about assistance dogs helping people who experience autism. And I thought, well, if they can help people who live with autism, maybe they can help with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So I called an agency called 4 Paws for Ability in Xenia, Ohio, and asked the director, have you ever trained a dog for somebody living with FASDs? And Karen Shirk, the director, said over the phone to me, I'm not sure, but we probably have. We just didn't know that that's what it was called. And she said, well, you know, your son has the prescription from a doctor. Our application was accepted. And that's when they started training Chancer, who became the first certified FASD assistance dog in the world.
So the dog got training specific to your
Son.
child's
Right,
disease.
right. And that is how they train their dogs. They use video mostly, so you are taping all the different behaviors of your child, and from that tape, the head trainer determines what kind of cues, what kind of commands can we give this dog to help disrupt behavior that you don't want there, or support behaviors that you do. So it's a fascinating process. And Chancer had over 500 hours of training. And we brought him home, and it just became such a clear and evident change in Ayal. I call it BC and AC, before Chancer, after Chancer. And that was in 2008 that we began our journey with Chancer. And Chancer, as a dog, opened up doors because people see a dog and they just kind of, they let down their whatever's going on with them. It becomes more comfortable, conversation, and having the word alcohol in your son's diagnosis, like, immediately makes people kind of back away, they feel uncomfortable. But Chancer validates an invisible disability. He legitimizes something that people don't want to talk about.
Now, when Chancer first came into the family, did Ayal take to him immediately, or was there a little bit of a process?
You know, he did pretty well. He did pretty well. And I say pretty well because, you know, it was difficult for Ayal to accept change and transition. And in a way, this was a change in our family structure. And over time, the dynamics became so much more healthy because of Chancer. And we believe he helped all of us, not just Ayal.
I want to go back to
Sure.
that, but I also, if you could share a story about how Chancer interacted with Ayal or helped him. I mean, what would he do as opposed to, you know, being there perhaps even as a comfort, just hanging out with a dog?
Chancer was able to alert to anything going on with Ayal from 3 stories up in our house. So if Ayal was beginning to get upset and throw tantrums, which he did when he was 9 years old, Chancer could sort of pick up on his energy and his muttering, and that muttering would escalate into screaming and crying. And the minute Chancer sort of detected something was going on, he would go down 2 flights of stairs and go right up to him. And the command Chancer had at the time was nuzzle to help de-escalate these tantrums. And he physically, you know, if Ayal was on the floor screaming with his arms like this, and Chancer would come up with his big head, and he would break open the arms of Ayal and begin to de-escalate him, licking and kissing him. And it was just magnificent to watch that.
Wow. You know, I'm just picturing that in my
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful sight. And you mentioned that Chancer also helped the dynamics of your family.
Yeah.
How did you sense that?
He alleviated some of the stress. And there's, I think, a lot of stress in families who are living with children growing up with disabilities. You feel impatient, of course you're worried, and Chancer grounded Ayal. He became an anchor for him pretty soon after he came into our family. And I think it just shifted. It shifted a lot of our energy in a way, so that we felt more confident that Ayal could change. And watching an animal do this and get him more centered and calmer. And Ayal would project on Chancer. He would say to Chancer, "Are you going to be upset, Chancer, if I have to go out bowling?" And then he'd look at me and say, "Do you think Chancer's upset?" And I'll say, "Why don't you ask him?" And he'd go back and talk to Chancer again and say, "Chancer, are you okay if," whatever the situation was. And even now, at 19 years old, Ayal will make a comment about Quinn, Chancer's successor service dog, and he'll say, "Does Quinn understand what bowling is, or does Quinn understand what having a cold means?" You know, so the dogs became kind of a mirror for us to see what was going on in Ayal's head and his understanding of the life around him by projecting his personality in a way on the dogs.
I know we only have about a minute and a half or so left. If there is a word or two of encouragement you might offer some other parents, I suspect that's included in the book, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say that you could find inspiration in places you don't normally would think provide it to you. And I certainly encourage dogs, animals as a support. But I also think it's so important for families to understand that these kids, they need us at all levels of life, depending upon how impaired or not impaired they might be. But it's easy to fall in love with kids. It's harder to stay in love with kids. And that's something we have to work on. And it makes a difference.
And I remember saying sometimes, "I love you, but there are times I don't like you," or
I don't like what you're doing.
What you're doing,
you know,
right.
Trying to, to weed that out, which is hard in the moment.
Now, as you said, that you saw Ayal projecting perhaps onto Chancer. Would you do the same thing too, in a sense, or speak to Chancer in hopes that that could be the message conveyed to?
I usually spoke more to Ayal because he was channeling Chancer. But, Chancer also knew with us that we were part of his pack. And if any of us started crying in the house for whatever reason, he immediately was there, almost anticipating what we needed from him.
Well, I'm crying because I'm being told we got to wrap this up.
Okay.
Donnie Winokur, thanks so much for being with us. Her book is Chancer, How One Good Boy Saved Another. Thanks for being with us on At the Table. We'll see you next time.